You are listening to the Practicing the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannyn Merlo and Julie Parker. Enjoy this conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to great success.
Welcome, Julie, and welcome, listeners, to Practicing the Art of Small Business. Julie, we're on episode number 59. How are you?
I'm super well. Thanks so much for asking, Shannyn. I hope you're well as well.
I am well, thank you. We are well. Well.
Well.
Well. Well, I don't want to alarm you, Julie, but I really just want to test the waters of when is it time to say goodbye today.
What are you trying to say?
If you don't mind.
Are you saying 59 is about the last episode we're doing?
Look, I guess it depends on how the podcast turns out, let's be honest.
Wow, a lot is riding on this.
No pressure. So I thought this one would be a good one to talk about because I recently said goodbye to someone who was doing some work with me and for me as a result of let's just say not delivering to the expectation that I wanted. It was a supplier, not an employee. It was a supplier who was doing some work for me, a subcontractor essentially. And someone else has come in and has started again from scratch, literally from scratch on the same project, on the same job. And I don't want to cast any dispersions on the previous person, but this new person who's come in has made a huge impact very, very quickly, and the project is going along at a cracking pace with a lot less stress and a lot less kerfuffling. That's a word I'm going to use more often. And I think that quite often, and I think I could have said goodbye a little sooner when I knew that things were not going according to plan. But I find that in my experience, a lot of business owners have the same experience. They hold on to a team member or a poor relationship or a client for far too long. And then when they finally make the move to say goodbye, the next person, the next client, the next thing that comes in is so much better, and there's a lot of regret that they didn't do things sooner. So that's what I wanted to talk about today.
That sounds great, Shannyn. Fantastic. I've already written down some thoughts just as you were doing your preamble.
I love that you write down thoughts as I preamble.
The first thing I wanted to mention, which I might as well just jump straight in and say it.
Jump straight in. Don't hold back, Julie.
is there is a reason why we don't jump too soon on these sort of things, or we don't jump the instant the thought kind of crosses our mind. And one of the reasons could be not trusting our own intuition about the situation.
Also, sunk cost fallacy. And to try to say that 10 times fast and you'll probably get in trouble. You're familiar with the sunk cost fallacy?
No, please explain.
Now, obviously, I'm going to get this completely wrong, so please check my workings on Google. But it's an economic term that basically means that we've sunk so much time, energy, money into a solution already that we keep seeing it out because we think that the investment that if we forego now based on the investment that we've already made, then we will lose out. And so I think there's the trusting self. But as soon as you said that, I thought about that sunk cost fallacy of like, we're in it now. We just keep going through. Might as well just keep going. And I think not trusting ourselves that we can make a better choice the next time is probably also part of that trust factor.
Yeah, I agree. I think another reason is eternal optimism. Like, oh, it'll work out. If I just put more positive energy in, I've got to give this person the benefit of the doubt. I've got to give it every chance under the sun to work out. And so that kind of, maybe prolonged optimism beyond what is reasonable. is another reason why we don't make the call early.
See, there is a benefit to being pessimistic, Julie.
They're never going to work out. It's always fun.
It all sucks. Give up now.
And also the usual trepidation that we do have around letting someone down, disappointing them, giving them bad news. That can also be why we delay the call.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's a part to play for I've not done enough?
Correct.
Okay, great. I'll give myself a tick.
The minute I started regularly asking myself, well, what more could I have done to create a better environment? There's always a list of answers there. You could have done this or this or this or this. So yes, I think so. I don't want to admit that I haven't done enough and I've contributed to this downfall of this relationship or situation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I know that's probably the sunk cost fallacy and the I've not done enough certainly played a part in me continuing with the project for a long period of time. There was definitely no optimism in there. There was no optimism for sure.
It's going to get better. No, it's not.
And certainly it was, I think, because it was a collaboration of the supply. I don't want to reveal too much because it's unfair to the person who I was working with, but it was a collaboration. But the person who was providing the supply was doing a specific job. It wasn't working for a client. It was working for me, for my business, delivering essentially a marketing thing. We'll just keep it nice and broad like that, a marketing thing. And so there was a part that I played in ideation and delivery and content and things like that. And certainly on my side, I was like, I don't think I'm doing enough. I'm not delivering enough. I'm not making fast enough decisions. I'm not guiding them enough and all the rest of it. But now that I'm working with someone else, I've come to realize, yes, certainly I could always do better. But the new supplier, we've moved forward past where we were on the previous project, and I've not done any more work. In fact, I've contributed very little.
And I've just written down flow. But you could also call it the universe. We could also call it no resistance. We could also call it we're in a groove with one another. There are situations where for no really particular fault on either side, it's just difficult working with one another. Yet there's other people that we just gel with straight away. It's like they get us, read our mind a little bit. We're both on the same page, easily on the same page. We're not constantly reminding each other where we're going because it's just there. It's just happening. And you feel like you're in flow with one another. And so I think that's an important aspect to come into play because I've certainly felt that. Like with you and me, I feel like we're in flow. Could I have this kind of conversation with just anybody? No. But it's just because of the uniqueness of both of us, the way we fit together, it just happens to work. And we find this when we're partnered up with people in our working environments for whatever reason. We find this. Sometimes it's just tricky. And you're like, why do I find it so hard to get to an outcome here? And other times it's like, I really enjoy the journey of getting to the outcome. I'm enjoying working with this person.
So let's flow with this level of thinking, Julie, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If you're not in flow with someone, let's talk about it from a team member perspective because I think there's more of an emotional hold for a lot of small business owners, certainly from my perspective from the coaching, that there's such a personal connection, I think, and that trepidation around letting them go and having to manage them and have to have difficult conversations and things like that. That's all in there. But if you're not in flow, should you be looking for that relationship, that flow relationship with an employee? Or should you, and I never like working in shoulds, or should you be expecting that flow is a beautiful thing that happens, and if you can create it, then great. But if you don't, then you've just got to soldier on.
Such a terrific question I don't know the answer to. It's like
we're out of flow.
Is it such a unique thing that when it does happen, just rejoice in it because it doesn't happen all the time?
Mm.
What we can have, we could put it on a bit of a gauge, couldn't we? That generally 80% of the time, possibly 80%, possibly, let's just go with 80-20 rule, possibly 80% of the time, we're going to be working with people that we can ensure we're creating the environment for effective collaboration and working with one another. At 10% up one end is where we're just clicking, we're in flow, and so I'm going to love it when I find it. And the other end of the spectrum is 10% where no matter what I find I do, I don't get to that enjoyable space of working with this person and we just can't gel. And so that's when we're definitely letting people go. I've just made all that up in my head, so I'm not quite sure if that's even accurate.
I like your statistics because I believe that 66% of 100% of statistics are made up. So
That's it.
I think they're good. I think they are good stats because I think it sets a tone of that we can't live in a world where we expect our relationships to require no investment of time and energy and change and challenge in order for them to be successful. And certainly when we're leading people and we're working with diverse personality styles and diverse value styles and diverse cultural styles, we need to learn how to adapt and adapt ourselves, because whenever anyone's talking about them wanting someone else to change, obviously we've got an issue there, because we can't expect anyone else to change to our standard or what we want. Only we can change to adapt the relationship to the way that we want it to be. So I think your 80% is actually a good metric of maybe our own calibration of within my circle of people, have I got 10% that I'm in flow with, which is really cool? Have I got 80% that actually for the most part we're working okay, but we've got to up our communication, or we've got to just sort a few things out, and maybe I've got to put my big girl or big boy pants on sometimes and just have a conversation? But maybe you're right. There were a number of times where I felt like I was talking English and there was hieroglyphics in the conversation on the other side. And it's not wrong or right. It was just that I wasn't able to communicate in a way that the other party was able to interpret and put into what I was looking for. And I tested it a number of times before I did say goodbye. But I think I had enough evidence to say this isn't working out much, much sooner.
Yeah. And so that's what the episode's about, isn't it? Is why, when do we make that call? Yeah.
All right. So when do we make that call? Let's say there's a listener who has a supplier relationship, a customer relationship, or an employee or team member relationship, or even a life relationship, and you're thinking that they might be in that 10% of you've got enough self-awareness to know that you are playing a part, and have you done enough? Really? How do you know that you're at that 10% and it's time to say goodbye? Tell me, Julie, how? I need a mathematical formula.
Well, I'm getting closer and
step-by-step
closer
process.
to answers. Now that we're talking about it, I'm getting closer and closer to answers. It's very exciting. So one of the exercises I suggest, is what Charles talks about this. So he says that with every situation, there's equal number of benefits and drawbacks. When we are, for example, looking for a new job because we're not enjoying our current job, we tend to look at the old job and focus on the drawbacks and ignore the benefits, and look at the new job, the potential new job, and focus on the benefits and dismiss the drawbacks.
I like the grass on the other side, because it's always greener.
Always greener, always greener. That's right. And so we can possibly do this in these kind of working collaborations, that when we're in that level of frustration and doubt, we are becoming a bit biased to the drawbacks and a bit blind to the benefits. And so I think that's the first exercise that we can do, is write down what are the benefits of working with this person and what are the drawbacks of working with this person. And, really try to get an equal number on each of those lists. That's one piece of data that can go into the mix. The second piece of data is that question, well, what else could I be doing to create an environment that is more likely to succeed? What else? What have I done? What else could I do to get there? And I think that's the second element of it. But I think whenever we are hiring a new person into the role, so they're moving through an onboarding process, we are training somebody who's already working with us in a new skill set and they're going through a training process. When we have outsourced part of our work to somebody else, such as creating a marketing job, and so there's going to be a process of learning about each other, learning what's required, and then steps going towards getting a good outcome. That there needs to be a reasonable length of time that I'm going to continue investing time, money, and energy into this process. And if it goes over that length of time, I have to start to seriously question whether success is a viable option here. And knowing that we need to put in our time, energy, and money during that process, all the resources that we've got to go through. Because if it was a new employee, for example, you're training them in the role to take up in your organization, you could say, we're putting you through a 3-month training program, and that's going to be your probation period as well. By then, you really should have achieved this level of success in these particular tasks and responsibilities. And we're going to be providing you all the training and resources that you need and the time to practice and repeat to get to that point. And that we have in our head then 3 months. If things aren't happening in 3 months, if there's a big gap there in 3 months, we are now seriously questioning whether this person is a right fit for this role. But so too, with this marketing project, I would, with fresh eyes, go into it with a thought of, with me putting in as much time, energy, and money as is required to achieve a successful outcome. If I'm not seeing a result here in a 3 month, we'll just use in 3 months, I'm going to seriously question whether this is going to be effective moving forward. So maybe giving ourselves a bit of a time frame is also an effective tool, a bit of data to throw into the mix as well.
I think timeframes are really, really valuable. I had someone once say to me, and I have no idea who they are, so I'm sorry that I'm not allocating quotes to them, but with a new starter, they talked about the 3-day, 3-week, 3-month rule. And what that was is that if you had concerns within the first 3 days of a new starter coming into the business, then you needed to have worked through those issues by 3 weeks, or you needed to get rid of them at 3 weeks. If you had concerns within the 3 weeks, you had 3 months to address those concerns, or you needed to get rid of them. And the reason that I like that is because it puts pressure on the person to really work on, is this a real problem? Can I rectify this problem in a very limited space of time? Because we know so many, I think, business owners go through a process with optimism, but intuitively know that it wasn't a great choice. So they get through 3 months and they're sort of doing the whole, I actually didn't do enough. I didn't spend enough time training them. So then they do it. I'm like, and I kind of didn't do much. So I'll extend their probationary period to 6 months, but then they forget that they haven't actually, again, invested in the management and and then they feel really guilty because they haven't done that. Next thing they know, they've got an employee who's actually not really performing very well, but not being managed very well either, but they've let it slide. And then that person has become a gap that has been filled, not necessarily well, but is filling a gap. And change, again, there's that sunk cost fallacy, because in order to change, I need to retrain the person. I've already put so much time and effort into talking to this person and managing this person. It's going to be better. And for the record, I am talking about a specific experience that I'm dealing with at the moment, not with me, with a client of mine. And so the client of mine, as much as I'm like, this person is not, they're not the right, what did someone say to me? They're not wearing the right shoe, or they're not the right foot for the right shoe. Basically, for their foot, they're not in the right role or something. I'm definitely mixing my metaphors here. Seriously mixing my metaphors.
And that's right. And I think, there is a level of responsibility. We are assuming through this conversation, we've had so many conversations around this sort of thing, around expectations. We are assuming that one of the steps that we have taken early on is made sure that we are doing our very best in communicating our expectation, and then is shifting it to be appropriate so the other person understands. So we're using that as an assumption. I love the 3 day, 3 weeks, 3 months thing. But I also love sharing that with the other person, because it is a dual responsibility role. One thing, if it's somebody, starting to work at McDonald's, their big thing, the employee needs to bring a good attitude and a willingness to learn, and the employer needs to be able to very clearly identify all the roles and responsibilities and give them practice and give them feedback all the way through. However, when we are talking about that kind of, you've got a skilled person coming into a skilled position within your organisation, either as an employee or as a subcontractor, to say, we're going to give it a period of time. We're going to check in at this time to see if we're achieving this level of success, and we're agreeing on that. And so what I assure you I will do is respond to any further requests about time, energy, money, to make sure, it's usually not money, it's usually already been agreed upon the money side, but time and energy, explanations, communication, to make sure that we're both achieving success. But you need to take on that responsibility too, and request further things of me if you feel you're not getting enough information to be able to move forward swiftly to the point where we're going to achieve some kind of success by that time as well. So share that timeline with them and have a very clear, friendly, professional, frank conversation around, this is when I'd like to see this level of success. Do you agree that that is possible? All things going well? Great, let's agree. Let's put it in the diary now that we're going to rejoin at that point. And in the build up to that timeline, we both claim our level of responsibility to make sure that we are on and remain on track.
Yeah, I love that expectation alignment. Oh, fancy words, expectation alignment.
Two big words.
But I do. Look at me. I do love that, because I think that that's the key to having great relationships, isn't it? And I wrote down SLA-boundaries. So let me work through what my next thought was. From a service provider perspective, a lot of the time when you're providing a service, you will provide like a SLA, service level agreement for technology, or you'll provide a project plan or an outcomes, or a here's what's expected of you, here's what's expected of me in our engagement, and here's what I expect of you. Certainly when I start a new coaching relationship, I say, here's how I'm going to be, and here's my expectation of how you're going to be and how you're going to turn up, and so on and so forth. And that's around setting boundaries of how we are going to work with each other. Now, from a supplier perspective, if your supplier is not aligning or not delivering aligned with the project or their agreement of what they're going to deliver and when they're going to deliver it, then you've got at least a benchmark of, hey, the project's blowing out, or you haven't delivered what you said you were going to deliver, or you haven't provided the services that you said you were going to provide. So it's very clear. And I think from that perspective, we do tend to be a lot more or a lot less liberal in terms of our acceptance for bleed to happen so much, especially if we're monitoring things really strictly. And I think certainly within my project, I was all like a bit laissez-faire, really, like, oh, yeah, we'll get this thing at the end. It'll be fine. And I had a bit of a project plan, but I was like, oh, look, I know that there's a lot that's on my shoulders to deliver. So, if we can work organically, that's really great. And as a result of that, it was just blah, 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 blah. That's a technical term, by the way, Julie.
No guidelines. But I think that's part of it as well. It's the kind of relationship that we are building at times where I don't want to come across as a hard-ass, control freak perfectionist. I want to, I'm not like I'm not always like that. But I want to have a relationship that is enjoyable for both of us to work together. But it is a professional relationship after all, where the best of intentions can be misconstrued and can start to set a new standard and tone. So we do need to have that structure behind it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do love your point around expectations for sure. And I do also love that idea that, especially in the areas that we operate in small businesses, it is so relationship bound. And so if we're not vibing with each other, if we're not having a good time, if we're not having a positive impact on each other's lives, then maybe that's the point where we go, you know what? I'm going to call it, because life is actually too short. It's my birthday. It turns out I checked my diary. It's my birthday next week. I had no idea.
You were going to say today
it was coming up.
Next Wednesday?
And so as the years, no, next Saturday.
Thank you. I'll keep a note. Keep going.
Everyone, my birthday is next Saturday. No matter when you're listening to this podcast, I expect a comment saying happy birthday. Well, we'll probably be doing a recording in a week's time, so then I'll remind everyone and I'll get 2 podcast comments about my birthday. Anyway, I'll move on from my birthday. I think in the small business environment with limited, we've all got 24 hours in a day, but if we really want to have an impact in those 24 hours, let's hang out with people that are having a positive impact on us and we're having a positive impact on them, because honestly, life, I do think, is too short.
You're absolutely right. And utilize these sort of experiences when we do employ people to do work for us, with us, and it's not vibing. Recognize we're on a constant and never-ending learning. That we're on a constant and never-ending learning journey with that. God, that took a lot to get out of my mouth for something I say so often. And realize, don't think to yourself, you picked bad, or, they've disappointed you because they're not as upbeat and fun as you thought they'd be. Just look at their characteristics and go, now that's interesting. So when I pick in the future, I'm going to make sure I encompass this other element of a characteristic that I'd love to work with in the future, and recognize that you're on a recruitment evolution and a person choosing evolution. And so none of us are good at the start. I tell you what, after multiple relationships, you can become very good at picking the right person to spend your life with. You don't usually do it straight away. Rarely do we marry the first person that we ever date. And so recognize that that's part of the journey as well. And I was speaking with the lovely Jutta today. We recorded a podcast for the Dental podcast, and she was very insightful and glorious. And she was talking about the being framework, like human being framework, and how it does tap into a more a series of more core characteristics such as responsibility and authenticity and things that really help align with the culture and the kind of, and so you can go down that sort of path as well when we're talking about who to bring in as part of the team. But one of the analogies she used was that, imagine, and we're just talking about life and self-development, self-awareness, imagine being born into the room that you're in right now. So that's it. I'm born into this room with these 4 walls, these bookcases, these bits and pieces, and I never move out of the room. That's just my world. And recognize that how closed off you are from everything else that's available out there in the world. And so do the same for ourselves, because one of the things I did write down, because of the joy you're experiencing now with that particular project, going along swimmingly, getting a lot of progress early, because of the fact you've, in essence, opened the door up and let one person out and another person in, you're encompassing their world into your room. And so now you've got another new series of, and opened yourself up to a new series of opportunities that you weren't availing yourself to before, because I've got written down here the positive value of fresh energy. And when you do find that great person, that fresh energy can be re-energizing you, brings a whole bunch of new ideas you've never thought of before. It becomes exciting and everyone's enthusiastic.
You're so right. That is one of the best reasons to be conscious of when it is time to say goodbye, because what's on the other side, when you think about it, an analogy is it's an anchor, and you're being anchored to this experience that you're currently having, and it can be messy and dragging and it feels like you're not moving forward. And once you cut the anchor, then the speed in which you progress can be astronomical, because you're bringing that new energy in, because you've got, the opening that I've experienced with this new supplier. I was literally almost in tears. I mean, it doesn't take much for me to get a little bit emotional, but I was so grateful to them for the work that they had done, because as you know, Julie, I do tend to spend a little bit of time beating myself up, just a little bit, self-analyzing, some good, some not so good. But I spent so much time going, this is me, I'm crap, I need to do better, to have someone else open the door and for it to be in that flow and for it to just be working and for it to be easy has just inspired me to actually do more and to achieve more with this relationship. And it does feel like that anchor has been cut, and I'm like powerboating down the bay.
Yeah, and I'm at the moment picturing, getting rid of that bad relationship, and then you get that feeling of freedom, release, and you go, oh, now I can do this, and I could do this, and I could do this as well.
Yes, I mean, I get seasick, so beware.
There is a pessimistic way of looking at the situation.
It's always good to have balance, Julie. So, Julie, you might have noticed as you were talking in the previous little segment that I might have been slightly distracted. And you know me, I do like to go back in time, because I was looking back at our podcast episodes, because I remembered that we did an episode, which is episode number 45, called How to Uncouple from a Client and Keep the Doors Open for the Future. And I think that if you value relationships and if you value your reputation, I truly believe that whenever you say goodbye, it's important to do it in a way that is with grace, because the world is a very, very small place, very small, and all we have is our reputations. And so I think that we can act from a place of love and kindness and be willing to shake hands and let it go and move on and move forward. But if we do it in a way that is coming from a place of anger or, I don't know, what are these other negative words?
Frustration, resentment.
Thank you. Then there is a risk that our reputation can get muddied along the line. So that person goes off and someone says, oh, I'm thinking of working with Julie. What do you think of Julie? Well, that bitch. So we're going to have to put an expletive. Can you beep through those, Julie? So we really focused on how to do that ending the relationship with grace in episode number 45. And Julie, I don't know if there's something going on. I'm going to have to see whether I suggested episode number 56, but I feared when I first looked at it, before I looked at my notes, that we're repeating the same episode, because episode number 56 is...
It's a different day, a different bench. So I'm sure this is quite a unique and separate episode.
Episode 56 is it time for you to draw a line in the sand? But we really focused on the employee side of things, and we talked a lot about how to make change in an organization. So we were talking more around, if we've got problems in the organisation, do we draw a line in the sand and forego the past and look to a new future? So it is a different episode with different context. Just the title was maybe slightly similar. So definitely check out those episodes.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, if we, talking about how to end part ways professionally in a friendly way, it becomes unfriendly when one person feels hard done by. It could be the person who's employed that person that feels hard done by because you promised a great performance, you didn't deliver it, and I'm pissed off now. I feel like I'm out of money. I've lost money on this deal, time and energy. I've got frustration, resentment now, and so I'm pissed. Or it could be from the other side saying, you never really were clear enough. I didn't realise they were your expectations. I didn't realise you wanted it to get done by that time. And so now I'm pissed because you didn't give me the chance. You didn't give me everything I needed to be successful. However, when you do structure it in the way that we were talking about, putting a timeline on it, a clear expectation of what success is going to look like by that time, what do you need from me, what do I need to give you, all of those things, let's claim our responsibilities, then by the time you're parting ways, you're both probably pretty much on the same page, and you do part ways in a professional way because it's been managed well.
I agree. Because that's the thing. That's the worst thing that can happen, is when it comes from nowhere and you're like, what? I didn't have a chance to improve. You didn't talk to me about it. You made no effort to help me do better or be better, because intrinsically people want to do better. No one wakes up in the morning going, how can I be worse today than what I was yesterday? I just want to see how many people I can pay off, how much trouble I can get. No one sets out to do that. Everyone does, I think, genuinely set out to do better.
Absolutely.
Again,
Absolutely.
I'm in my own little,
No, you're right. The question people often ask themselves in the morning is not, how long is it going to take this person to fire me? Wonder if they'll beat the last record.
Sometimes they do. So, there's that. So what do you think, Julie? Is it time? I just want to clarify, I don't think it's time for us to say goodbye, because we are vibing, I think.
Phew,
You're in my 10%.
I've got it locked in my diary for
We
next week.
solved that.
What's going to happen? We're supposed to wish you happy birthday next week, so you have to keep it going.
Until next week. Is there anything else that we need to say before it is time to say goodbye?
I think we've covered it. I've covered everything I wanted to cover. All my points are ticked.
Well, be sure to set expectations and a timeline if you do want to cover more, so that I don't say goodbye too early. So, in my rappity rap, Julie, is it time? Wickeda, 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 woo. Wicka, wicka. We often don't say goodbye for a number of reasons. Things like not trusting ourselves, internal optimism, trepidation around having difficult conversations, and asking the question of, have I done enough, as well as the sunk cost fallacy of when you've committed and you're in it for the long haul, even though you know it's not doing you any good. I love Julie's mathematical formula to, are we vibing or are we not? And if you've got 80% of the relationships you're going to have to work on, 10 are going to be in flow, and 10 are probably ones that you might want to question whether it's time to say goodbye. There are benefits and drawbacks to, ask yourself a question, benefits and drawbacks to this relationship. Specifically, I liked your thing of writing it down, because I often think through all of this, but it's when I write it down that I really get clarity of the benefits and drawbacks to be able to make better decisions. I think also setting that time limit and maybe not the 3-day, 3-week, 3-month with hiring a new person, but if you are seeing that this relationship is not great, set yourself a timeline of, I'm going to have a conversation about my expectations of what change and what success looks like. And within a week, I want to see real fundamental shift. Within a month, I want to feel comfortable that this relationship is moving forward at a really great rate. And within 3 months, I don't want it to be an issue. And if any of those milestones have not been hit, it is time to say goodbye. Be conscious of SLAs and setting boundaries with your team. Be sure to go back into our podcast episodes to hear Julie and my dulcet tones. We're not repeating what we've said before. Not really, although the titles might say so. And be sure to set those expectations and timelines so that when you say goodbye, you can uncouple gracefully.
Oh, beautifully summarised. Thank you so very much. Thanks for the wrap.
It is my pleasure. Always such a pleasure to talk with you, my flow friend. This sounds terrible.
My flow friend. You know what flow means in other language, don't we? Depends on timing.
Golly. I think I cooked Razzle. I need to. I'm actually not going to be able to show.
So he's spread eagled.
I'm technically not supposed to show that, but if you're on YouTube,
that was pretty cute. That's pretty cute. That's a pretty comfy puppy, that's for sure. Well, I look forward to seeing you next week for your birthday, Shannyn, your birthday episode.
I look forward to being here for my birthday episode.
As long as you're clear on
Sorry,
it.
I muted my mic. Well,
thanks, Shannyn. I'll see you next time.
Thank you. It's time to say goodbye now.